Welcome everyone to Monday Match Analysis. I'm Gill Gross, back in LA, back from the US Open. We're powered by BetUS. It is going to be another notebook dump-like episode. There is so much to talk about. I spent a lot of time on Arthur Ashe watching some of the really big matches over the course of the second week, especially starting on Tuesday for the quarterfinals. And I'm really excited to share my thoughts on some of the big quarterfinals that went down. On my television screen, I also just watched the women's semifinals. And this format, this notebook dump format, allows me to do a lot more women's coverage. So I'm going to take advantage of that and do it. I think the headliner right now, maybe the match that people would want me to begin with, is Sinner versus Medvedev. Potentially the de facto final on the men's side. I know I power ranked Zverev above Medvedev. I will tell you that by the time we hit the quarterfinals, I thought it was pretty clear Medvedev was playing better. That said, was it deceptive? I don't know, because it wasn't a great Medvedev match against Sinner. So I've covered this head-to-head so much in the last couple of years. Not even the last, I guess the last couple of years. They've just played a lot. And it's been a very dynamic matchup. It has evolved a lot. And it's gone a couple of different directions in terms of its evolution. But, I came into the tournament thinking, okay, there's a lot of things that I think Jannik can do a lot better than he did at Wimbledon. First thing just being the fitness levels and the movement should be better. Then the second thing is the creativity that I thought he really lacked at Wimbledon. I don't think he ended up being all that creative in this match, Jannik Sinner. There was a little bit of it, but we've seen kind of two versions of Sinner's defeats of Medvedev. We've seen some matches where Jannik has really attacked Medvedev's weaknesses, and he's incorporated all the things he's worked so hard on to try to get better at beating players like Medvedev, such as opening up short angles off the ground, using the drop shot, mixing in the serve and volley, coming forward more often in general, changing direction a little more often in the backhand rally. There have been some displays where it's been like, oh wow, Sinner is using all of these new skills to help him get through the line against Medvedev. There have been other matches where Jannik hasn't done as much of that against Daniil, and it's more Sinner beating Medvedev in his own game. And this match, which was a very strange up and down match, I'll get a little bit, I have a theory as to why it was like that. This match was a lot more the latter. Sinner beating Medvedev in his own game. Jannik was willing to trade 10 balls in a row, backhand to backhand. No change of direction, no change of rhythm, no backhand slice. Not breaking it up necessarily with a drop shot. Sinner was like challenging Medvedev in the neutral baseline rallies to find a way to beat him. And normally against Daniil, that's playing with fire, because when Medvedev is really in a zone, he just doesn't miss. It's very hard to get the ball through him. It's very hard to rush him. It's very hard to force an error against him. So usually it's very advisable to tap into your creativity when you're playing Daniil Medvedev. What happened here is Medvedev never really found that lockdown consistency. In the second set, we saw a little bit of it, but for the most part, let me pull up the statistics here on this match. It was pretty shocking how many rally balls Medvedev missed. In set one, winners to unforced errors, 15-6. Well, I actually went the wrong way on that. 6-15. So 15 unforced errors, but I believe he made 7 on the backhand. But if you look at the match overall, 30 winners, 57 unforced errors for Medvedev. So it's a really poor ratio. I don't love to lean on that. It doesn't always really tell the full story. But let's go to rally stats. So Medvedev on ground strokes made 20 forehand unforced errors, 15 backhand unforced errors. And only 8 ground stroke winners, only 1 on the backhand. So you're looking at Medvedev's backhand, 1 winner to 15 unforced errors. And just watching the match, especially on some of these big points, Daniil was missing shots where you were like, what the heck? That's just not a shot he misses. That's oftentimes how I was feeling about Medvedev during the match. And then he seemed like rather flummoxed by the way the ball was reacting against his string bed. I mean, that's how, that was the level of, I guess, out of rhythm, out of sync Medvedev was, where he was literally, I think, looking at his equipment like, why is the ball coming off my string bed this way? Because it just wasn't, he didn't have the feel or the control really all night. Sinner played Jannik played badly in the second set. I think the reason it was so up and down, it was, scoreline was 6-2, 1-6, 6-1, 6-4. There were finally some really nice moments in the fourth set, but it took a while for that match to heat up. I think the reason it was so blowout-centric in the first 3 sets was because the serves weren't doing a lot of damage. So when the players lost the range off the ground, they were really punished for it. Like when Medvedev started slow, it's not like he could make up for the fact that he wasn't hitting the ball well from the baseline. Normally, if that were the case and Daniil were getting some damage with his serve, he might still be able to hold a couple times just because maybe he got some free points, maybe he got some easy +1s that he was able to put away. But none of that was happening. So you got a 6-1 set. And I think the same thing for Sinner. Now, maybe I don't think Jannik served badly in this match, but he's playing Medvedev. Great returner. Sinner, great returner. I thought the returns were dominating the serves on both sides. And I think that's why we got the blowout sets more than we would typically see, particularly in a men's match where the serve usually dominates quite a bit more. Medvedev's forecourt play could have been a difference here. I have in my notes, and I didn't take that many notes because I was on U.S. Open Radio on the air, so I wasn't focused on note taking. But he had a backhand volley on break point in the fourth, and I do remember it now that I'm thinking back to it. That could have been a big moment. I think he could have taken a lead in the fourth set, and he just took too big a swing on this backhand volley. The ball was coming in with a lot of pace by Sinner, and he just knifed it way wide. It wasn't that close. And it was just an example of Medvedev's shortcomings at the net, where I think an experienced volleyer would have kind of read the pace incoming and just shortened up the swing much more than Medvedev was able to do, and deaden the pace of the ball and sort of angle it off short cross court. But it was not an easy volley, but it would have been handled, I think, by a really good volleyer. And Medvedev, being an average volleyer, didn't get it done. So that was very important. And then the way Sinner converted his break point was interesting because he took all the pace off the ball and just baited Medvedev's forehand. The way Jannik was playing a lot of these baseline rallies, as I said, it was not a matter of figuring out a way to use the creative tools to find a finish. It was actually like a lot of it was just feeding Daniil and actually trusting he's going to miss before I miss. That's what happened on the break point. Jannik, I think he had a backhand. He hit it super slow right down the middle. It wasn't like a easy ball to attack. It's not like he gave Medvedev a sitter intentionally. No pro would ever do that. But he did bait him. He was basically like, here's a forehand in the middle of the court. See if you can generate on this ball. And Sinner won the bet because Medvedev looked to generate and he missed the forehand. The one exception to what I'm saying that I do want to mention before I move on from this, return position, Medvedev return position, Australian Open, when they played Miami and Wimbledon, Daniil moved up to defend against Sinner serve and volley. I expected him to do that again, especially because it worked at Wimbledon. Daniil moved back. So what does that tell us? That tells us that on hard court, grass is a little bit different, low bouncing surface, I suppose, and a surface where it's more difficult for Daniil to defend and move on. But on a hard court, when Medvedev has fresh legs, he still felt like the ultra deep return position was his best chance. And Sinner, I believe he lost 1 point on serve and volley, maybe 2, but I think it was 1. And I know he was like 9 for 10 when he lost that first point. He probably finished the match something like 11 for 12 or 11 for 13 on serve and volley. So that play was available. I think Sinner could have used it more, quite frankly, than he did. But when he did use it, it was successful. So that's what I got on Sinner Medvedev. Was it the de facto final? We will find out. Who knows? So that was last night. The other match last night was Swiatek Pegula. So let me hit that real quick. Iga getting upset. Although it's not a massive upset. It's not. I mean, it was a difficult matchup for Jess early in Pegula's career. But since then, she has been able to get a couple of wins over Swiatek. I don't know if I want to start with like the Iga thing alone or the match. Let me start with the match. I mean, frankly, I think there's been a little bit of a shift in tactics against Iga, not just for Pegula, but for everybody. When Swiatek first came up, I think her forehand was quite scary for opponents. It is scary. Her forehand is scary. It's the heaviest on the tour in terms of RPMs and well, it's number 1 in RPMs, but if you combine it with speed, like it's probably the heaviest forehand on tour. So I think at first that was the flashier shot from Swiatek, especially on clay, and women would try to avoid it a little bit. There would be a bit of an intimidation factor there. It's really the worst thing you could do, though, is to be afraid of Iga's forehand, because if you play her backhand, she's more solid and she uses it really well as a setup shot. And when she hits a good backhand, she earns herself time on her forehand. It's much better to go proactively at Iga's forehand, especially through the middle of the court. Pegula's game plan was clearly, I think, to hit up the middle at Swiatek's forehand as hard and as deep as possible. As is the case with most tactics, this isn't about genius. This isn't about some brilliant idea. This is about execution. And Pegula's ball is so good in terms of executing this kind of shot against Swiatek, just because her depth is incredible. She hits way harder than people realize. This is a drum that I would like to bang on, especially as she's now a major finalist. Pegula hits huge, and it doesn't always look like it because she does not grunt. She does not necessarily throw her body into the ball. Her biomechanics are very in control. They're very almost quiet. And sometimes I think it's deceptive on television. But she is a player, not only does she take the ball early, she hits huge. And it's deep and it's flat. And this U.S. Open court surface, the ball doesn't check. When a player hits a flat shot, it is rewarded with that nice skid through the court. Iga hated Pegula's ball last couple nights ago. She hated it. I don't know how else to put it. It was way too low for her, and she just wasn't able to handle the flat ball deep through the middle at her forehand. She made so many errors there. Samsonova forced a fair bit of errors there as well against Iga. So that was one issue. That was the most, basic issue for Swiatek. Again, I want to give credit to Pegula because most players wouldn't be able to hit that kind of ball as well as Pegula could. Forehand to forehand, I also think Jess found a massive advantage in her ability to change direction a lot better than Iga does. I mean, Swiatek's best forehands are cross-court from the deuce side or inside out from the middle of the court. She doesn't redirect down the line all that well, and I think that does have to do with her technique, a little bit more of a vertical windshield wiper sort of technique, where Pegula is very flat kind of through the ball. Generally, players whose technique look more like Pegula's are better redirectors of the tennis ball. And in every forehand-to-forehand rally, the threat of Pegula's down the line change of direction was way more serious than the threat of Iga's. That was pretty significant. And then in the backhand rally, I just think it was the height. Jess's shot stays so low, it did not allow Swiatek to get aggressive with her backhand because the ball was staying too low. Swiatek served horribly by her standards. Pegula has improved her serving. She's made the first serve a bigger weapon than it used to be. And, the only thing that really helped Swiatek tactically, and she started to figure this out in the second set, it just wasn't quite enough, is when she played with much more shape on the ball, she made it more difficult for Pegula to hit that low, linear, deep, flat, penetrating stroke that Swiatek couldn't really deal with. When Iga would loop the ball with a lot of shape, that makes it pretty hard for Pegula to, first of all, it moves her back, it pushes her back, and basically Iga was getting more time on the next ball, and her next shot was at a more comfortable height. I think she did figure that out a little bit, but it took her a long time, and I think she spent the entire first set, Swiatek, trying to bang with Pegula, trying to go toe-to-toe with, the same sort of fast, low, aggressive ball striking, and Pegula was going to win that battle. It was just, she was better in that. All right, but bigger picture. I mean, the larger discussion about Swiatek is really important to have right now. I posted a stat on Twitter, which, of course, people did not handle with any sort of maturity, largely. Not everybody, obviously, but just I knew when I tweeted it, the replies and the quotes were going to be a mess on both sides. Look, Swiatek, since winning the U.S. Open title in 2022, has not made a semifinal at any of the three majors outside of Paris. Only at Paris has she been able to make a semifinal. Sabalenka in that same span, who we compare to Iga because she is Swiatek's chief rival. And she is the only player who you could argue is on Iga's tier. So, of course, we're going to compare Iga to Aryna. Sabalenka has made a semifinal in all 5 of her main draw appearances at the Slams outside of Paris since U.S. Open 2022. All 5. So she's been there. Yes, she's only converted 2 into titles in that span. Same as Iga, by the way, 2 Roland Garros titles. But basically, Sabalenka has gone deeper every single time than Swiatek. So what is it? Well, it is not that Iga can't play on hard court. Anyone who feels that way just isn't paying any attention to what Swiatek is doing for the last 2 years and beyond. Just not. She won the WTA finals. She's won plenty of Masters 1000s. If you subtracted Clay out of her ranking, I don't know if this is still going to be true post US Open, but if you took Clay out of her ranking, she'd still be world number 1. I know, shocking, crazy, it's true. It's just math. I mean, Iga's a phenomenal player on hardcourt. That's not Iga's problem. Iga has a slam problem. She has an anxiety problem. She has a stress problem. That is why she has been unable to perform to the best of her capabilities at the majors outside of Paris. It is not about her ability to play on hardcourt. It is about her propensity to panic and to hit herself out of matches. I mean, statistically, I know I gave Pegula a ton of credit, I think all deserved. Statistically, it was a horrible match for Iga. And you can say all you want about, well, she struggles with that deep ball down the middle at her forehand, but most of those are getting scored as unforced errors, right? And if you look at it, I mean, really, really poor stuff from Swiatek. And you do, every single time, I think, you sense panic in her game. And she does not play her best. She has not played her best at these majors. She's played much better at the 1000s. Come on now. Let's say it for what it is. She's struggling with the pressure of the majors. That's it. I think it's pretty clear. All right, the other 2 quarterfinals that I want to talk about, actually 3 more I want to talk about. And by the way, the ones that I'm not talking about, the reason is because I didn't watch them, because I was doing something else. Whatever the reason might be, that's the reason. All right. Fritz versus Zverev. Taylor Fritz breaks his quarterfinal drought. He was 0 for 4. Wimbledon was disappointing. That was the first one that he was actually expected to win. He lost to Lorenzo Musetti. Came into this match against Alexander Zverev, and he got it done. Now, the Zverev head-to-head with Fritz, well documented. I think they've played enough and they've been in each other's draw enough where I've said this a lot, but Zverev beat Taylor twice when Fritz was like outside of the top 50 and Zverev was already a top 10 player, and it was like, the stage of Taylor's career where he just wasn't a top 20 player. Ever since Fritz has become that guy, he beats Zverev more often than Zverev beats him. So take notice of that, right? Taylor is an incredible ball striker, and he can go backhand and backhand with Zverev. He's one of the few who can do that. He can certainly go forehand to forehand with Zverev. In fact, he'll take himself. He'll back himself in that cross court. He can hit serves with Zverev to an extent. He's a smidge below Sasha's level on the first serve, but he can certainly get into a server's duel with Zverev and come out okay. The area where Zverev has typically looked better than Fritz, or has separated himself from Fritz, is really just in the movement. But if you look at this match, Zverev was so passive, he was so listless offensively, that Fritz didn't have to do a ton of scrambling. Taylor was very comfortable in this match because he was not getting put on the run a lot, because Zverev, it's kind of typical Sasha, and it's why I think he has struggled against top 10 players at the majors, throughout his career. If you look at his record, or one of the reasons why, he's willing to be aggressive after, on his first shot after the first serve. Maybe the first 2 shots after the first serve. Then after that, suddenly it's like, okay, time to grind. Something goes off in his head. All right, I didn't get that immediate advantage with the serve. Now I'm going to drop back and grind. And it's very difficult to beat Zverev when he goes lockdown mode from the back. Like, don't get me wrong. But that day, the consistency was not bulletproof. Like, he was not as rock solid as he needs to be or as he usually is. So there were more misses creeping in or mixed in. And physically, it didn't feel like he had a lot of energy. I mean, Zverev was flat. And look, I watched him all tournament. I watched him a ton. There were times where I was like, wow, Zverev's playing good tennis here. But at no point did I think he looked like, I don't know, spirited, energetic. He kind of looked miserable to me on the court the whole tournament, and I didn't really know what it was about. I thought it was, like, when he played Echeverry, I thought it was because it was so late. And then it just kind of persisted, and he got off to some bad starts. Where I would credit Fritz here is that he was brave. In those moments where Zverev was like, especially in the 4th set, when Zverev was definitely probably thinking like, oh, like Taylor's never made a slam semifinal. He'll get tight. So I'm just going to hang back and play percentage, and not, try not to miss any balls, which again, didn't always work out because he missed neutral backhands on the biggest points of this match, especially in the 4th set. But when Zverev came in with that approach, like Taylor took his chances. He swung big on the forehand. He came in at times in some big moments as well, which I think Fritz has looked more comfortable volleying at this U.S. Open than he has ever looked, which I think I covered in my previous notebook dumps. That's where I would give Taylor the credit. He was brave. He didn't let that scar tissue get in the way of playing offensive tennis against Zverev, who he looked very willing to be like, here, you decide the match. So, very, very negative, low energy performance from Zverev, tactically uninspired, but also excellent from Taylor. Monday Match Analysis is brought to you by BetUS. There is no better place to bet the U.S. Open with just a few matches to go. And currently, BetUS is offering new customers an 150% bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000 with code YouTube150. It is an even better offer than before. Head on over to betus.com. Please gamble responsibly and don't harass the players. Tiafoe Dimitrov. Now, this one is, of course, disappointing because Dimitrov got hurt, and that's ultimately what decided the match. I mean, look, this is gut-wrenching for Dimitrov because it has happened so often, and it happened at Wimbledon. First set, playing Daniil Medvedev, something happened, boom, he was finished. Grigor has retired mid-match at 7 out of the 56 majors he has played in his career. That is 1 out of every 8. I mean, it just makes you shake your head. And I can think of a couple where he did not retire, but he could have. And that includes last year at the U.S. Open against Zverev, where he hurt himself. He could not really move well. In the 3rd and the 4th set, he lost 6-1, 6-1 after being very competitive in the opening 2 sets. So he was injured at last year's U.S. Open. What about Australian Open 2021? He won the first set against Aslan Karatsev and then ended up getting hurt. And he finished that match, but he wasn't healthy. And then Karatsev went to make the semifinal. You just don't know. It could have been Grigor. So it's so difficult to so difficult for Grigor. I feel badly. I do wonder at this point, just because it's such a statistical anomaly. I mean, he does not retire that often, but it always happens at majors. So it's strange, and you wonder if maybe the heightened stress levels do make him more susceptible to injury, but that's obviously mere speculation. I could almost guarantee you that there's plenty of science behind stress levels and how that can result in muscle tightness and injury, because basically anything bad in the world physiologically is made worse by stress, but you just don't know. Point is, it's another really disappointing injury at a major for Dimitrov. I will say, I think Tiafoe was on his way to winning that match. He was not playing his best, but he was playing, I think, good enough, and I think he had some... I think he was clear-headed about the tactics that he needed to play. And he was very intentional about coming in and making Dimitrov pass him with his backhand. If you look at how Francis, for example, broke serve in the first set, it's 30-all, and Francis hit a cross-court backhand approach. Dimitrov tried to drive the ball down the line. If you have Dimitrov hitting a topspin backhand, redirecting down the line, you are the percentage player. That is not a shot that he executes with regularity. So you are the percentage player if he's doing that, if he's hitting that shot. And on a backhand cross court, right, you're coming from the cross court, so you have that side covered, and you're kind of asking Dimitrov to drive a backhand down the line. It's a good play. Next point, break point, Francis does it again. And this time Grigor tries to chip the pass, and he doesn't make it. A chipped pass, it can be effective, like if you get it really low and you can set up for the next ball, but hey, if you have your opponent hitting slice passing shots, again, you are the percentage player. And Francis is very good at using his feet to get himself into these proactive situations where he's opened up an opportunity to hit an approach shot. So I think for that reason, Francis, for the most part, was on top of the proceedings. Obviously, there was a huge turning point in the second set where Dimitrov hit like a circus backhand flick pass down the line. He hit another later in the set, and his forehand really started to catch fire in that second set. So some of those big points, those big scrambles, Dimitrov using the athleticism and the forehand coming alive, it won him the second set. But I think Tiafoe got back on track in the third, executing the tactics that he needed to, and then the injury happened. So that was that. Last quarterfinal I want to talk about is Zheng Sabalenka. I don't have that much here, but when Aryna Sabalenka is the more disciplined player on the court, that's crazy. When Sabalenka is the player who is playing the percentages and essentially making more sensible decisions with her shot selection, you don't see that very often. But Zheng, I don't know if it was because of the late finish against Vekic or what, or if she's intimidated by Sabalenka. It just seemed like she was trying to make everything way too good. And boy, she was a loose cannon, spraying the ball all over the place at the end of the day. She still needs to learn to absorb pace better, or she's going to struggle, I think, on surfaces like this. She is using her court position to try to buy herself time. So she is standing deeper on the return than I've ever seen a female player stand, which I'm pretty happy to see that, because I think some women I think they would be aided, and it would be advantageous for them to experiment with deeper return positions. players like Zheng, Qinwen, who have long swings, big loopy swings, plenty of weight of shot, and plenty of athleticism to maneuver positionally around the court and recover that deep return position. So Zheng checks all the boxes for a player who, is basically able to take advantage of an ultra deep return position, and she was doing that. Now Sabalenka did kind of dominate her on the deuce side with that slice serve out wide. So you're going to see that, and obviously there needs to be multiple options if you're Zheng. But, also I think it needs to be both. That's great that she's utilizing the deeper positioning on the court to buy herself some time. She also, I think, needs to learn how to shorten up. And the serve is an interesting thing because, again, like she continues to be one of the most prolific, ace hitters on the tour. I mean, she hits a ton of aces. When her first serve goes in, it's great, but the percentage is so low. I mean, her season average is 52%. So when she when she has a below average serving day, like she did against Sabalenka, well, now we're looking at a 40% first serve percentage. Now we're giving Sabalenka second serve looks. That's always a problem. Always. So, let me start with I know I'm jumping around a ton, but I'll have timestamps on this. So, let me give my quick thoughts on the men's semis. Fritz leads the head-to-head against Tiafoe 6-1. That is huge. That is significant. That's lopsided enough where Francis knows that Taylor is a problem for him, and Taylor knows that he's a problem for Francis. And I think that's a huge deal. Do I, recall very vividly any of these matches? To be honest, the Tokyo final a little bit, but not enough to really say. And I could have maybe tried to look at my notes, and I didn't. It has been pretty busy. But yeah, nothing where I'm like, I can't tell you like this is what Taylor did in this match. I can't go into that sort of detail, but against Tiafoe, you want to make things boring, right? You want to keep the points very simple and basic and make him impatient. And Fritz is really good at that. Taylor, he's a good spot server, and I think he'll bother Tiafoe's return quite a bit. Francis has returned much better at this U.S. Open than he has been generally over the course of the season. But again, it kind of comes down to when you're serving against Francis, he really makes you pay if you miss your spot. Really makes you pay. But if you hit your spot, you get rewarded for that. Because he's not all that long. He stands really tight on the baseline. He does a lot of guessing. He's the most aced player on tour in the last several years. So Taylor can use one of his big weapons to make things pretty easy on himself. It's going to be really interesting to see if Francis can get enough returns in play because, he played Ben Shelton. He played Grigor, Dimitrov. Like, these are good servers. So it's not as if he's, navigated a path with a bunch of guys who don't serve well. But I think Taylor is the best out of even factoring those two in there. So that's one thing to watch out for. But look, from a ball striking standpoint, from the back of the court, it really comes down to Taylor is more solid when he's on the move. He's more consistent off of his forehand. And on the backhand, where Francis finds an advantage against most righties, because he really does use the backhand as a setup shot extremely effectively. pinpoint accurate on the backhand, keeps it very low, keeps it very deep. Taylor's not really going to allow Francis to build points through his backhand or through the backhand channel. Like, that's not really going to happen. So I think the forehand battle favoring Fritz is a pretty big deal, and he'll be able to kind of rush Francis with consistent pace into big targets, keep him at bay, keep him on the baseline, and I think Fritz is going to win this 1 in 4. You do have to address, though, the non-tactical stuff when it comes to this match. Because if Francis is going to win, he's going to win on emotion, he's going to win on vibes, he's going to win on nerve management, he's going to win on, clutch gene and prime time compatibility, which is a term I just made up, but it encapsulates Francis Tiafoe. Look, can I just say this now? I don't think I've said it yet. In all my years covering tennis, watching tennis, I am confident in saying there is no comparable example to Francis Tiafoe and the way he becomes a better player at the U.S. Open compared to what he is the rest of the year. I mean, are you kidding me? 2 semifinals in the last 4 years, quarterfinals or better in each of the last 4 years. You watch Francis all year round. He's not that player all year. He's just not. I have never in my life seen a player whose level changes so drastically at one particular event. And don't give me like Nadal at Roland Garros, right? That's not applicable, because guess what? Sure, Nadal might be a little better at Roland Garros than the others, but does he dominate Rome? Yeah, he does. Did he dominate Monte Carlo? Yeah, he did. So it's not an apples to apples, right? You can't give me Federer won Basel a bunch. Well, yeah, of course. But for Francis, his results outside of New York suggest that he should not be capable of the kind of consistent results that he delivers in New York. It's completely unique to Francis Tiafoe, and it's not a coincidence. It's his makeup. It's his energy. It's the passion and the focus and the doggedness that he ends up tapping into when he plays at the U.S. Open, and that's the difference maker. So if if Taylor is a little bit shell-shocked by the occasion or a little bit tight, like Jessica Pegula was in her first major semifinal at the start of the match, and Francis embraces it a little bit more and kind of plays with more energy and more positivity, Tiafoe maybe then can overcome some of the technical stuff. I mean, look, tennis is like that sometimes. But yeah, I think Fritz wins in 4. The other one, this one's a little more difficult for me because I've missed a lot of Jack Draper matches. I don't feel as in tune with what he's been doing and how he's been playing. I mean, I had some eyes on the de Minaur quarterfinal, but I was quite preoccupied with some other things. It seemed like his serve and his forehand were flat out, bullying against Demon. Jannik I've seen a lot more of, and I think he's looked pretty darn good. Maybe an 8 out of 10. If what he was doing at the start of the year was a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10, I think at the U.S. Open he's close enough. He's like at an 8 out of 10. And all I will say is Sinner's return has been destroying everybody. I mean, that's been, I think, the main problem for Tommy Paul and Daniil Medvedev going up against Sinner. The returns in play, the consistency at which the returns are landing deep, and then he's moving well. He's looking pretty good in the rallies in terms of his fitness levels and his explosive movements into the corners. So when you have a guy who's, you just can't really, you can't get an advantage with your serve because his returns are constantly just neutralizing. And then on the second return, even worse, the ball's at your feet every time. I know this sounds familiar. It's very, very Novak Djokovic. I think his return looks similar a lot of the time on hard court to Novak's return. But when you're dealing with that, and then the guy is moving well in rallies and staying tough in the rallies, which I think for the most part he is. I still think there's a couple percentage points of consistency that dropped off from what it was at the start of the year, but I think it's pretty close. That's hard to deny. Sinner's hard court record, hard to deny. So I would like to be able to tell you more about Draper's kind of level. I know he's crushing everybody. He's destroyed everybody. And you know how I feel about Jack as a player, those of you who have been with the show all this time. I predicted him to finish year-end 11. This will go a long way in at least getting him closer to that. He's a complete player. He's got a fantastic lefty backhand. He's got a forehand that can be flawed, but they've done miraculous work to get Jack to start to use that as more of a penetrating weapon, to be able to flatten out the forehand and dictate with the forehand instead of it just being like a kind of a high RPM but kind of a slow, like spinny shot, which it was too often in the past. So they've done that. They've done a great job with that. He's an excellent volleyer. He's a really good mover for his height, and he's got this awesome lefty serve. And that's why I'm high on Jack Draper. He checks all the boxes. But am I gonna deny what Jannik has done? Am I gonna pick against Sinner here? Will the occasion get to Jack? Maybe. So no, I'm gonna go Sinner in 4. All right, ending quickly with the women. Sabalenka beat Navarro tonight. In the larger picture, I don't want to get into too many larger picture things. First of all, I think Navarro is a pretty tough matchup for Sabalenka because she's a brilliant pace absorber. I think overall, defensively, she's elite already. She's incredible. She combines some of the speed and explosiveness we see from like Coco Gauff and Iga Swiatek, but she marries it with a commitment to defending that we see from like a Daria Kasatkina or a Marie Bozhkova. Like, she reads the game very well. She extremely well. That both left and right, and like when she's about to get attacked, she does a great job of giving herself some extra time by moving backwards. And if she has to hit slice defense from desperate positions, she makes the extra ball in the court. If she has time to hit over the ball, she's pretty good from extreme positions at going high, heavy cross court and trying to reset the point. Like, she's defensively impeccable, so she makes Sabalenka hit extra balls, and it's a good quality to have against Aryna, of course, especially if she's going to be a little bit error-prone. But for the most part, Sabalenka was not. I just want to give Aryna a lot of credit for keeping it together after her serve was broken at 5-4 in the second set, serving for the match. I mean, there have been nightmarish losses for Sabalenka at the tail end of slams in the last 2 years. So you have that in your mind. She gets broken serving for the match. She keeps it together, and then in the tiebreak, what does she do? She doesn't just blast Navarro off the court. She actually reaches into her bag of clubs, so to speak, and she executes 2 beautiful transitions to the net. One of them, I think, was at 2-all. Then the other one was at 6-2. I mean, you could say the tiebreak was already over, but you never know. And she actually hit a second serve return and came in behind a second serve return. Whoa. Aryna Sabalenka. she also executed a really, really good drop shot. So, okay, volleys, drop shots. That's how good Navarro's D is. Because Sabalenka, basically playing anybody else, can just blast the ball right through. But she was willing to use some other tools. So, really, 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 really impressive win from Sabalenka. Navarro's run does not surprise me. Navarro beating Coco Gauff. Did I expect 19 double faults from Coco? No. But the result, not surprising. It's just not. Pegula against Muchova. Awful start for Jess. Totally paralyzed. Muchova won the first set, 6-1? Maybe 6-2? And then she was up 2-love and had a break point. And Pegula hit a squash forehand out of the corner, down break point, in no position to win the point. Muchova had a stretch forehand volley with basically the whole court. And she hit it long of the baseline, which I was stunned by because she didn't need to volley that ball deep. A very mediocre drop volley would have been an outright winner. So I don't know why. Maybe she was just so focused on stretching out for the ball that she kind of lost the court awareness there. But I don't know why the target for the volley was even anywhere near the baseline for her to miss it long. So, look, Muchova's a fantastic volleyer. That was a surprising mistake. It turned around the match. Jess got her feet going, and the average rally length really started to increase because Pegula stopped missing, and that was always going to be what the match is about. Like, could Muchova execute the first strike aggression and get to the net early on and have do a good amount of damage with her first serve and all that, or were they going to play baseline rallies? Because if they were going to play baseline rallies, Pegula is a little bit more fit. She's got better shot tolerance. She's more even off of both wings because Muchova's backhand is a little bit limited, although I actually think she was hitting it maybe better than I've ever seen her hit it over the course of this U.S. Open, which I think, like, if she gets the two-hander going on a consistent basis, she's going to win a major. She just will, because that's the only hole with Karolina Muchova. But Jess has been working on her speed around the court, and she came up with some massive scrambles here at the end of the day when she needed them. Then she started to, I think, get to Muchova's physicality as they got into more baseline rallies. But only after she kept herself in the match with some of these desperate scrambles. And Pegula has been working hard on that. She is quicker than she's ever been. And I don't know how she did it, because she's at that age where usually you're starting to get a little bit slower at her age. But the way she's moving is fantastic. I have plenty more to say about Sabalenka and Pegula, but I want to save it for the post-match of the final. Like, after the final, I'll do a video and I'll get all this stuff out. In terms of previewing it, I'm going to keep it pretty simple. I think Pegula offers up a little bit too much rhythm. You need to get Sabalenka to miss. You need to find a way to be disruptive enough where she misses balls. And I don't know that Pegula is going to be able to do that. I think Sabalenka, from start to finish, has pretty much looked like the best player at this year's U.S. Open. And I think she's going to win the final in straights. All right, men's semifinals tomorrow. I'll have post-match coverage of that and a preview of the final. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. Thank you, BetUS. I'll see you next time.